8 million people, in one day, across all 50 states and 14 countries. That number isn't from protest organizers, it's from the Associated Press, using satellite imagery, cell phone data, and on-the-ground verification. March 29, 2026 is now officially the largest single day of political protest in American history, and it happened while the country is at war. 2 days ago, on March 28, 3 million people marched under the No Kings banner. Washington dismissed it. The Pentagon called it expected democratic expression. Cable news covered it for one cycle and moved on to the Iran war. Nobody expected what happened next. The number didn't shrink, it tripled. Here's what changed in 48 hours, and why the White House is now treating this as a national security issue. The first No Kings march drew from the usual protest demographics: urban, educated, politically engaged. The second wave is fundamentally different. Cell phone mobility data analyzed by MIT's election lab shows that March 29th participation skewed heavily toward demographics that almost never protest: rural conservatives, military families, and evangelical Christians. In Fayetteville, North Carolina, home of Fort Liberty and the 82nd Airborne, an estimated 40,000 people marched. These aren't anti-war activists. These are military spouses, veterans, and active-duty family members whose husbands, wives, and children are currently deployed in the Persian Gulf. When the 82nd Airborne's own community protests the war the 82nd Airborne is fighting, that's not politics. That's a fracture in the civil-military relationship that hasn't been seen since Vietnam. In Lubbock, Texas, a city that voted 72% Republican in the last election, 15,000 people showed up. In Provo, Utah, the most conservative metropolitan area in America, 8,000. In Dothan, Alabama, population 72,000, nearly 5,000 marched through downtown. These are not cities that protest. These are cities that support the troops, fly the flag, and vote for the party that started this war. And that's the data point that has Washington terrified. This isn't a left-right issue anymore. It's an American issue. Let's talk about the three grievances driving this, because they've evolved since March 28th. The original No Kings movement had three pillars: the unauthorized Iran war, the ICE killings of American citizens, and executive overreach. On March 29th, a fourth pillar emerged: economic pain. Gas prices hit $5.40 per gallon nationally on Friday. Grocery costs are up 12% since February. The stock market dropped 1,400 points in a single week. Americans who weren't politically motivated 2 days ago are now standing in the streets because they can feel the war in their wallets. The economic dimension transforms this from a political protest into something much more dangerous for the administration: a cost-of-living revolt during a war. History shows that governments can survive anti-war movements. They cannot survive anti-war movements combined with economic crisis. The French Revolution, the fall of the Soviet Union, the Arab Spring. Every major political upheaval in modern history involved the intersection of military overreach and economic suffering. Now let's look at the international dimension, because No Kings went global on March 29th. Solidarity protests took place in London, Paris, Berlin, Tokyo, Sydney, Sao Paulo, Mexico City, Toronto, Amsterdam, Stockholm, Seoul, Mumbai, Cape Town, and Buenos Aires. The London March drew an estimated 200,000 people, the largest anti-war protest in the UK since the Iraq War demonstrations in 2003. The European protests carry a specific political charge. NATO allies who refused to support the Iran war are now watching American citizens reject it too. French President Macron referenced the protests in a press conference, saying, "The American people are telling their government what 28 NATO allies already said: this war has no mandate." That statement will have consequences. When Allied leaders publicly align with domestic American protesters against American foreign policy, the diplomatic isolation of the United States deepens. The administration is now fighting a war that is opposed by its own allies, its own citizens, and increasingly, its own military families. So what is the White House doing? 3 things, according to reporting from the Washington Post and Axios. First, the administration is framing the protests as a national security threat. On Saturday evening, the Department of Homeland Security issued a bulletin warning of potential for protest-related disruptions to critical infrastructure. This language is significant. It's the same framework used to justify surveillance and crowd control during the 2020 protests. Second, the president posted on social media calling the protesters Iranian sympathizers and enemies of American strength. This rhetoric is designed to delegitimize the movement, but polling data suggests it's backfiring. A CNN Snap poll conducted on March 29th found that 61% of Americans support the protesters' right to march, and 47% agree with the protesters' core demands, including 23% of Republicans. Third, and this is the most consequential, the administration is accelerating the Karg Island operation. Multiple Pentagon sources told NBC News that the timeline for the island seizure has been moved up by 7-10 days. The calculus is simple: end the war faster, and the protests lose their primary grievance. It's a gamble, because if the Karg operation fails or escalates, the protest movement doesn't shrink. It explodes. Here are the 3 scenarios for what happens in the next week. Scenario 1, Karg Island succeeds, war winds down. The U.S. seizes Iran's oil export hub, collapses Tehran's revenue, and forces a ceasefire within weeks. Oil drops, gas prices fall, economic pain eases. The protest movement loses momentum. The administration claims vindication. Probability, 30%. Scenario 2, Karg operation escalates, protests grow. Iran retaliates against Gulf state infrastructure. Oil spikes to $180 plus. Gas hits $7. The economic pain that drove 8 million people into the streets gets worse. No King's Week launches on April 7th with work stoppages and highway blockades. The movement becomes ungovernable. Probability, 45%. Scenario 3, political breakthrough. The protest pressure forces Congress to act. A bipartisan coalition invokes the War Powers Act, requiring a formal authorization vote within 30 days. The administration, facing both military and political pressure, accepts a modified ceasefire through Pakistani mediation. Probability, 25%. 8 million people, 14 countries, military families marching against their own war. Rural conservatives in the streets for the first time. Gas at $5.40 and rising. And a White House that's responding with surveillance language and accelerated military operations. The No Kings movement isn't a protest anymore. It's a political earthquake, and the aftershocks haven't started yet. What happens next week? Military escalation or political retreat? Tell me in the comments. Subscribe to Realpolitik for daily analysis of the biggest crisis in American democracy since the civil rights era.